Hi, I'm Brad. Today I'm building a Curio shelf. A Curio shelf.
A Curio shelf.
I downloaded the plans from the internet. I'll post the link in the comments section below. I bought two 6-foot 1x6s. This is clear pine lumber. I also bought an 8-foot strip of 3/4 inch cove molding. Also wood glue and some finishing nails. The plans call for using a table saw in this project. I don't have a table saw, so I'll be showing you how to use a saw guide and your circular saw to make the cuts. Let's cut our shelf top first. I'm going to measure down 36 inches and I'll mark that with my builder's square. And let's go make our first cut. The next piece that we cut is going to be for our front and two sides. So we're going to take our other piece of wood and we're going to measure down 40 inches. We'll mark that with our builder's square. And let's go to the saw and make our cut. Now it's time to cut the base. This piece is going to be 2 3/4 by 30 1/2. We're going to use the part that we've marked A, our tabletop, and we're going to clamp it to our sawhorses. Then we'll take the piece that we're going to rip and we'll attach it. I'll put a 3 or 4 penny finish nail in this piece to hold it to keep it from sliding as I make my rip. I'm going to use my level as a saw guide. Now, since the piece is 3 1/2 inches and my saw has 1 1/2 inches to the edge of the table, I'm going to measure up 5 inches and then attach the straight edge to my work table. Try to make your measurements as close to the end as you can. And then after they're clamped, check it again. Then I'll go down here to the other side. And do the same thing. Okay, now that we've got a 3 1/2 inch wide piece of stock that's 40 inches long, let's go ahead and finish making our front and sides. First, I'll measure down and mark 32 inches. We'll take this to the miter saw and we'll make our cuts. Then we'll use this remaining stock to make our two side pieces. When you're cutting your sides, make sure to be really careful. What I've done is, I've got my first side set up here on my saw and I've clamped it into place. Then what I've done so that I can make the other one identical is I've taken a pencil and marked on my saw's cut fence where the piece was located. That way when I mount my second piece, I can mount it in exactly the same place and get an identical cut. And there we have it. Now I can do my miter cuts on my front piece. Okay, since I've got this 40-inch piece of stock still up here on my cut table, I'm going to skip ahead and I'm going to rip one of my band molding pieces. I've set my saw guide back 2.5 inches because I want this piece to be 1 inch wide by 3/4 of an inch deep. I'm just going to take another piece of stock and clamp it to my sawhorses. This will keep my saw from trying to pivot when I run down this very narrow section and make the cut. Okay, now I'm going to measure and set up to cut my bottom. It's 2.5 inches and it's going to be 30 inches long. So I take 2.5, add 1.5 for my saw. I measure up 4 inches. Attach my straight edge. And I'm ready to make my cut. Now I can trim this piece to 30 inches using my miter saw. The base measures 2 3/4 inches wide, so I'll measure up 4 1/4 inches before attaching my saw guide. Again, to keep my circular saw from dropping, I'm going to attach another piece of stock out here for the saw to rest on. Our base is now trimmed to 30.5 inches long. Okay, I've got one 36-inch piece of 1x6 stock left. I've set it up to go ahead and rip one more 1-inch strip. Then I'm going to use the stock remaining to cut the cleats that I'm going to use to hang the shelf on the wall. When you cut your cleats, you've got to be a little careful. They're specified as 1 1/4 inches long a piece, but that includes the 30-degree bevel. We really only need a piece about 2 inches wide. If you cut these pieces too wide, you won't be able to get the two pieces to come over each other to hang the shelf on the wall. I've set it up to rip it to the 2-inch width. Then I'm going to set my circular saw at a 30-degree cut. I'll have to reposition my saw guide and make that cut. Okay, I've set my skill saw to cut the 30-degree bevel. At this point, I'll take my pencil and I'll just write matched set across these two. That'll keep me from getting them flipped over or backwards, and that way when I hang it up, my shelf will hang nice and level on the wall. Okay, our cuts are made. Now comes the fun part. Let's put the shelf together. Before you start nailing, screwing, gluing, I'd recommend that you test fit your parts. But when I get over to this end, I see that my bottom is just a little bit long, and I need to take about 1 saw blade off so that my other side will bed nicely. Okay, the test fits are done, so I'm going to start gluing up my project. I'm going to also use my little 18-gauge nailer. Okay, so I'm going to start on one side. Okay, now we're ready to attach our simple box to our top, but we've got to center it first. So take your tape measure, measure each side, and move it back and forth till they're even. If you've made your cuts right, what you're going to find is it's going to be about 2 inches overhang on each side. Once you have this, you can kind of lightly mark it. And that'll show you where to put your glue. If you want to put some nails in, remember, you've got 2 inches of overhang, and then your wood is 3/4 of an inch thick. So if you put your nails 2 3/8 of an inch back, they'll go down right through the center of your wood. This is the point where we stop measuring and cutting, but instead we cut to fit. So we'll cut an angle, bed it, carry it over, mark it, and then go and cut it specifically to fit. Then we can take our other band molding, cut our angle, lay it in place, mark it, and cut it off. That way we don't end up with gaps because we cut a piece just a little bit too short. So I'll position the piece. Mark over here at the edge where the other miter goes. Okay, my front piece is cut, and I've got a 45 on another piece, so I'll bed the two, and then I'll mark this one for a straight cut. Notice I've not attached any of the pieces yet. Okay, once you've carefully cut and test fit your band molding, you can go ahead and attach it. What I've done is I've clamped my center piece. I'm going to glue and nail my side pieces, and then I'll glue and nail this front piece. And again, these nail holes and imperfections will be hidden when I run the cove molding. I'm going to run my cove molding the same way I did the band molding. I'm going to lay it here in place. I'm going to cut a 45 on this end, then I'll bring it back, fit it, cut my 45, and then I'll cut my other two pieces and the same technique. Okay, I've got my 3 pieces of cove molding fit. I'm going to glue them and nail them now. At this point, the plans are calling for a 1/4 inch plywood spacer that goes between the shelf base and the shelf bottom. Instead of buying a whole sheet of plywood, I'm just cutting some little 2-inch pieces out of these 5-gallon paint stirrers, and I'll put those spacers here, and then I'll set the shelf bottom on that. The trim will cover that all up. Your shelf should be 32 inches wide. So I'm going to put a pencil mark right here at 16 inches. Our shelf bottom should measure 30 inches. So I'm going to put a little mark right here at 15. Then I can take these spacers, and I've actually cut them at 1 7/8 of an inch, and I can just lay these spacers out. I'm going to put a little glue on them. I'm using them again in lieu of my 1/4-inch plywood. And then I can set this on and just line up my 2 marks here, and I'll know that I've got this centered. Now all we have to do is run our last pieces of cove molding. Okay, I've got my last piece of molding ready. Let's glue and nail it. Okay, now I'm going to install the cleat that allows you to hang it onto the wall. When you install this piece, it has a ramp to it, and make sure that the longer tooth is towards the outside. In other words, if you were to set a ball here, it would roll down the ramp to the inside of the shell. It's good to cut the piece that will screw to the wall a few inches narrower, and that way, once this is on the wall, you can slide your shelf back and forth a little bit to get it exactly where you want it. At this point, your shelf is completed, and you can decide whether you want to oil it, paint it, or stain it.